Exactly. You have to raise your hand.
Yeah.
I think in the beginning, I did sort of rely on the opportunities coming to me, which was great. And I was so fortunate for that. But eventually you have to want to kind of get to that next step. You have to be the one reaching for it.
This is Inspiring Women, and I'm Lori McGraw, and today we are at the inaugural Transparent Voyages Conference, and I am speaking with Colleen Bowman, and she is the Vice President of Human Resources at IAC. Colleen, thank you for being on Inspiring Women.
Thank you for having me, Lori.
So this is, you said that this is sort of like, this is the inaugural conference that we're doing here called Voyages. And this for you is a little bit of an inauguration because like it's your first podcast.
It is, yes.
So
Bear with me.
this is going to be great. So why don't we start, Colleen, just tell us a little bit about you. Tell us what you do at IAC.
Sure. So I sort of have a jack of all trades, I guess one might put it at IAC. We're an interesting kind of company. We are sort of almost a tech holding company, I would say. So we own a lot of different brands, but then we have one sort of internal corporate department or team, I suppose, which is the IAC corporate company. And so my role is to work sort of in partner with all of our different brands to make sure that they are getting the HR and benefit and TA support that they need basically to run their own organizations. So a large part of my job right now is benefits. The interesting part of sort of the corporate world is that there aren't many pieces that are shared. All of our different organizations have their own accounting teams, or they have their own CFO, their own CEO, et cetera. And one of the only shared items across all the companies is the benefits. So healthcare, 401k, sort of all of those ancillary.
So you're
benefits.
sort of like bringing it all together
Yes.
in an organization that is otherwise not sort of like, working in more siloed departments.
Correct. Yes. And so every company has their own needs. They have a very different type of population from Angie. From Angie's List is one group. So we have the folks that are out there actually doing sales, that are doing some of this work, the handy work, and then we have a Dot Meredith, which is a publication company.
Yep.
And so they own People Magazine and Food and Wine and all of that. And
Oh,
so
wow.
all of the populations
Brands we all know.
totally different.
Yeah.
Yes. That's the funny thing about IAC is that many people don't know IAC, but they know all of the brands.
The
that we've
companies
owned or
within.
that we currently own. Yes.
Yeah. And Colleen, how long have you been there?
Only about 7 months now.
Oh, okay. So this
Yeah.
is fairly new because
Very.
your background, I mean, you've come from big brands before, Revlon and others. So
Yes.
give us a little bit of the trajectory from the, being in human resources. I want to do a little bit go back, but
Yeah, of
just
course.
tell me about the human resources, like why now IAC?
Yeah, of course. I started off my career sort of more in the nutrition and corporate wellness space, kind of 15 years ago when corporate wellness was sort of what everybody thought was going to be the big new thing, and all the insurance carriers were hiring, health improvement.
Isn't it
people.
funny? It's like the big new, it's always been an important thing.
Of
Can
course.
we just like stop for a
Yes.
second?
Yes, but it's, it was sort of this big fad that had come out, and I was interested in it, and so I ended up working at Cigna for only about a year, and realized that I loved the benefit side, and so I moved on from Cigna to Saks Fifth Avenue,
Yeah.
and ran some of their wellness programming, and then sort of broadened my scope while I was there into some of the other benefits and perks and rewards and all of that. And then from there, I moved into Tiffany & Co., which was probably my sort of first, it felt like my first real benefits experience, I guess, where I was managing a team and, leading others and sort of being the SME on site, et cetera, which was great. But I realized sort of that I was more interested, or not more interested, but I was also interested in the other parts of HR.
Yep.
And so I was looking for an opportunity that would kind of expose me to those. And so when I moved to Revlon, I actually had this incredible boss who kind of took a chance on me. I wasn't necessarily probably the most qualified person, but him and I really connected and had a lot of the same sort of views and values about what to do, within the total reward space while we were there. And so he, took a chance and hired me, and it worked out.
I bet it was. I bet it was not that big of a chance. So, Colleen, I want to like sort of go back a little bit because you started off in nutrition, and we're at this conference, and it's a conference of leaders. And so, back before you were on the leadership journey and where you are today, you started out. Aren't you a nutritionist by training? Like, wasn't that the early days?
I'm not a dietitian. But I am, I suppose, could still call myself a nutritionist. So I went to my undergrad at BU. I did. It was one of their sort of first couple of years of dietetics. Their newer program back then, and then I spent a couple of years working for Head Start, which is a federal nonprofit that provides preschool and family resources.
Great early stage education for people who need it or young children that need it the most.
And so I managed sort of nutrition programs around the city of Boston. And helped support that, which was a really great opportunity. And I guess to be candid, I was also applying for dietetics internship. For 2 years in a row, and I actually didn't get in. Yes.
Wow.
It's very competitive, and also I just, there
are a lot of companies who are thanking their lucky stars that didn't happen.
I was doing it because I thought that should be my next step. I was like, I finished undergrad. This is the normal next step, and I just didn't get in. My grades weren't, 100% of everybody else's, I guess.
You didn't go through Head Start.
Exactly right. I had a little too much fun in college, but it was, and that's probably actually the truth, is that I did fine, but I had such a great social experience, and it really helped me build sort of my networking and my just how I approached people, that I think that was probably my biggest learning out of college, honestly. And that has certainly served me well throughout this. But I didn't get in, so I was like, okay, I guess what's my next step? So I applied to grad school in New York. I'd always wanted to live there, and I went there and did nutrition and public health. Because I realized that as I was going through it, and maybe the hospital was not like the setting for me, and I was very interested in sort of the analytics and the data of how the work that the nutritionists and all the other healthcare providers do sort of impacts a larger population. And so from there, I realized that I could translate that into even working for employer groups or insurance carriers, and looking at that and getting access to that data and sort of helping evolve that conversation.
Well, now in the, as a leader of HR with that, I would just say non-traditional path in terms of how you found yourself into the space of HR and now benefits and now a leader of IAC. How does that perspective and background for you, what are the sort of issues that you're facing or thinking about, whether it's at IAC or just like HR issues in general, because it's a complex world, only becoming more complex. We spent this morning talking about the forces of AI, responsible AI. We've talked about fiduciary responsibility. So in a very litigious culture that we find ourselves in the United States, we talked about trust and things like that. In terms of, the role of HR, many people think about it as, the culture, or culture police or, issues that are certainly important, hiring and management in that capacity, but the level of cost or cost containment, the opportunity to provide health and care to people, your team members, and keeping them engaged, that issue, we're seeing costs exploding, and is the single largest, most likely out of control item on anyone's balance sheet of a large employer. And then the other aspect of what you're talking about is just the risk. So, it's one thing to be in the area of HR. It's another thing to have your general counsel or your CEO or your CFO who you're suddenly, responsible for the single largest areas of the organization. How equipped do you feel to be able to navigate these complex issues in a changing landscape?
Well, I think that, almost bridging back to my social time at BU, sort of the most important part, I think, of being a leader for me right now is building those relationships and those partnerships. You have to be aware that
bingo. This is like just like amazing. Isn't it funny how just like things that you would think like you would started with like, oh, maybe I had too much fun, and now here it is like that. Absolutely. That is an absolute, power zone for you.
Completely. Yeah, and it's just you have to recognize that, I don't know everything. I can't do everything, but I can be selective and choosy about the partners that I work with and that I hire. And also that, if I build relationships internally as well, that those people can help support the cases that I'm trying to make. You need to build the trust and give them something, and then they'll give you something back in return. And so, I do feel equipped sort of to handle those conversations in those scenarios because I trust the people that are behind me and that are, supporting me as well, so I think a lot of sort of being equipped is having, the leadership skills as much as having sort of maybe that knowledge or those facts behind you.
In terms of being a leader in that leadership journey, at what point during this trajectory from, starting in nutrition and wellness and then having an interest in the area of benefits and HR at a different scale, at what point did leadership become something that you identified with? It's like, hey, I am the leader here. Was that something? Was it a particular point, or was it just a natural evolution?
I actually can think back to probably sort of a couple of, leaders or previous leaders of mine that have impacted sort of how I turned out maybe. One was many years ago when I was first getting into the benefits world. I was managing sort of just the wellness programs at this company and had expressed interest in learning more about the administration and sort of the policies and the compliance and all of that. And all of a sudden, sort of that role opened up at the company. And my boss approached me, even after we'd had these conversations. And my manager said, you know what, I just don't think that you're ready for that job. So that's why I'm not going to interview you. You agree with that, right? And I was a little taken aback. And I realized, I do think that I am ready. But I was almost in a moment of surprise that I didn't voice that, right? And I had always thought of myself as someone who, you fake it till you make it. Like, you have to assume you can do something, you'll figure it out. You just have to say yes to things. But I realized that I was going to have to be more proactive about doing that. And so sort of that conversation made me realize that, that's not the leader that I want to become. I want to become somebody that boosts up your team rather than just makes sort of negative assumptions and brings them down. And I also realized that like I said, I need to start being more proactive about what I need. And that will help me learn how to do the same for people, that work for me eventually.
Yes.
And then I did have sort of, like I said, at Revlon, I had a great connection with my manager there and considered him a mentor. He gave me, a lot of opportunities and chances to get involved in things. And even my most recent manager at IAC, actually, I worked with her at our previous company at Related, and just found her to be such an incredible support system. I felt that I could go to her for something, I could ask for something. There were sort of no boundaries in terms of, if I had an idea or an opinion or a suggestion, she was always open to listening to it. And so I think that I've taken a lot of that sort of in as well. But yeah, when I started off, I always thought, maybe benefits will just be my thing. And then I grew to, total rewards and comp and all of that. And then came communications and TA and all of these other pieces. Just everybody, when times are difficult or somebody leaves, an opportunity does arise.
I'll take that. I'll raise my hand.
You have to raise your hand. I think in the beginning, I did sort of rely on the opportunities coming to me, which was great, and I was so fortunate for that. But eventually, you have to want to kind of get to that next step. You have to be the one reaching for them, right?
I think that's such an interesting point because it's very true. In the early stages of your career, the opportunities come to you for advancement. You raise your hand. You're a person that can be counted on and go to. But then, as you progress in your leadership journey, then you actually it doesn't just come to you. You actually have to push for it. Yes. You have to raise your hand louder in a more proactive way. I think that's a really excellent point. You also talked about, Colleen, the people who have inspired you to be a better leader, but you are now a senior leader. So how are you inspiring others?
I think that sort of the way that I explain my leadership style is, I guess, empathetic with expectations. Might be a way to put it.
I like that.
I generally lead with empathy. I want to understand the position that somebody is in, but I also, you can't treat your employees too preciously. You have to enable them to believe they can do something and set those expectations. And then also, sort of be, I guess, it can be difficult to have difficult conversations, but you have to, practice and get better at sort of maintaining those expectations and making sure that people realize that they have so much potential and they can do all of this, but there are kind of, I guess, guidelines or
rules,
like
expectations is a great word for that.
You want, it's an expectation for a team member because I know that they can do it.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm setting anything unrealistic. Again, lead with sort of the empathy piece. But you want to be able to, like you said, inspire and acknowledge to people working for you that you believe that they can do this.
Yeah.
And that's why you're asking them to do it. Right.
Yeah. So Colleen, I wanted to actually sort of close out some of this conversation with, we're heading into, challenging waters. Again, we've got trust issues, and we know that actually trust is increasing with employers if you lead with transparency and everything else. And that comes from, what you are doing specifically. We also know that we're heading into divisive times and what's happening with workforces in general, and you have multiple different ones that you're dealing with. So as you look ahead, maybe the next 1 year, 2 years, is there any predictable things that you are like, I am really going to solve for this one, or I'm really going to begin to, manage an area differently than you previously have? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think all of those are incredibly sort of valid observations and things that we're in the midst of right now and probably will be for years. But I do think that, as you said, sort of the trust that is being placed in employers, especially as we just listened to, sort of women in general are making healthcare decisions and they're trusting their employer more for that information. I think it's a huge opportunity, but also we have to be very careful with what we're saying and how we're presenting information. But sort of also going back to kind of the cost piece and sort of the line item, one of the sort of best kind of lines that I heard about benefits a year or two ago was that it's such a large cost item. You could run a business with this amount of money, and so why are you not treating it like one? Why do you not have P&L? Why do you not have a communications department? Why are you not basically advertising and acting like this is its own business, because it could be with the money that you're spending on it. And so I think just a huge part that is very hard to navigate is the employee education and communication, because everyone ingests information differently. Everyone, they might have children that are on TikTok and they're getting information. They may have, parents that are listening to a news program that's,
or a podcast.
Yes. And so I really just think that the biggest focus, I think, that I would like to sort of put on sort of our team this year is really, how do we get simple and clear information out to employees so that they start caring about their health care and their own health before it's a problem.
Yep.
Right? We need people to understand what their benefits are, what their plans are, what's offered to them, how they can take advantage of all of this before they're in a crisis mode where they're panicking, they're not sure how anything's working because all they can think about is sort of their own health or their family member's health. So how do we get employees or consumers in general to just be thinking about, their health care and taking advantage of the dozens of things their employers probably offer.
Well, that is such a full circle. So to starting with your focus early on in terms of wellness and nutrition, and now in terms of understanding that the business of healthcare and what employees actually have to deal with and accessing healthcare, which comes through benefits, giving them the understanding and education of the financial aspect of it is just incredible. Last question, I promise, Colleen, this is Inspiring Women. I'm always interested in helping the next generation of women leaders come forward. What's your advice to them?
Oh man, I think, just assuming that you can do something is, such a huge, I'm struggling with the word, I guess, but it is just like feeling confident that you can do something even if you've never done it before. Even if and I've done this my whole life, I still Google things. If I don't know the answer to something in a meeting, I'm Googling it, right? Like you can't know everything. So fake it till you make it is kind of a cliched term. But if you're nervous about something or scared about something, just because it's new, just put on a face. Like if you act like you know what you're talking about and what you're doing, then people will believe you, right? You're the subject matter expert, you're the leader in the room or becoming a leader, and just sort of presenting yourself in a way that is confident, even if you don't necessarily feel it behind, can make such a big difference. And I do think that practicing that makes you start to actually feel that way. You know,
Yep.
I think one of the best compliments that I've ever gotten from a friend is she was sort of in a difficult, I guess, toxic work situation, thinking about whether to leave. She didn't have a job lined up. And sort of we were talking through it, and she said, you know, I think the sort of one of the best qualities of you is that the confidence that you sort of seem to feel in yourself about being able to get through any situation inspired me to have the same confidence, so that I felt like I could leave and still be okay.
Yep.
And I think sort of it takes, I guess maybe the real nugget here is that I think building that confidence takes practice, and sometimes you do have to fake it until it becomes sort of a normal and or comfortable feeling.
Well, look out, because here it is on display. And this has been an excellent Inspiring Women conversation. I've been speaking with Colleen Bowman. And Colleen, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
This has been an episode of Inspiring Women with Lori McGraw. Please subscribe, rate, and review. We are produced at Executive Podcast Solutions. More episodes can be found on inspiringwomen.show. I am Lori McGraw, and thank you for listening.